The call came in just after sunrise, when the city was still quiet and the streets were empty except for delivery trucks and early morning walkers. A neighbor in Building C reported a strange smell coming from apartment 3B, along with loud noises heard late the previous night. Police arrived expecting a routine welfare check. What they found instead would become one of the most disturbing cases the department had seen in years. The apartment belonged to Daniel Harper, a 32-year-old freelance journalist who kept mostly to himself. He wasn't the type to throw parties or cause trouble. Neighbors described him as polite but distant, always carrying a backpack and rarely staying in one place for long. When officers knocked and received no answer, they used the master key provided by the landlord. The door opened easily, and that alone felt wrong. Daniel was known to double-lock his door. The smell hit them immediately. It was the unmistakable scent of death. Daniel's body lay on the living room floor, just a few feet from his desk. He was fully clothed, no signs of a struggle visible at first glance. His eyes were open, frozen in a stare that seemed focused on something only he could see. A thin line of dried blood ran from the side of his head, pooling slightly against the hardwood floor. There were no overturned chairs, no broken glass, no obvious weapon in sight. The scene was quiet, almost peaceful, which somehow made it more unsettling. The apartment itself was small but neat. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with old case files, notebooks, and worn paperbacks about unsolved crimes. Sticky notes covered parts of the walls near the desk, scribbled with dates, names, and short questions written in black ink. A half-empty mug of cold coffee sat beside a laptop, its screen dark. Everything suggested Daniel had been working late into the night. Then one officer noticed something unusual. On the desk, placed carefully beside the laptop, was a small digital voice recorder. It looked old-fashioned, the kind used before smartphones made recording easy. Its surface was scratched, and the record button showed signs of heavy use. When the officer picked it up, he felt warmth. The battery indicator still showed life. Someone had used it recently. Detective Laura Bennett arrived minutes later and immediately sensed that this case was different. She had worked homicides for over a decade, but something about Daniel's apartment felt intentional. Staged not to hide the truth but to preserve it. Her eyes moved from the body to the recorder, then back again. She ordered the room secured and asked for the recorder to be handled carefully. Before sending it to evidence, she made a decision. She pressed play. A soft click echoed through the quiet apartment, followed by static. Then Daniel Harper's voice filled the room. It was calm at first, but there was a tightness beneath it, like fear being held back. "My name is Daniel Harper," he said. "Today is November 17th. Time is 11:42 p.m. Detective Bennett felt a chill run through her. The medical examiner had estimated Daniel's time of death to be shortly after midnight. This recording was made less than 20 minutes before he died. Daniel continued speaking, explaining that he was recording in case something happened to him. He paused often, as if listening for sounds outside the room. His breathing was shallow, controlled. This was not a man rambling. This was a man who believed he was in danger. "If you're hearing this," Daniel said quietly, "then I didn't make it. I wish I could say I was surprised, but I'm not." The room seemed to shrink as his words played on. Officers exchanged uneasy glances. They had seen suicide notes and dying declarations before. But this felt different. Daniel wasn't saying goodbye. He was leaving evidence. He talked about being watched, about realizing too late that his investigation had crossed a line. He mentioned files that had disappeared, phone calls that ended in silence, and strangers who knew his name without ever being introduced. His voice cracked when he admitted he should have gone to the police earlier, but he didn't trust them anymore. Detective Bennett stopped the recording for a moment. She looked around the apartment again, noticing details she had missed before. The curtains were drawn tight, even though Daniel lived on the third floor. The lights were on in every room, including the bathroom and bedroom, as if darkness made him nervous. The locks on the door showed scratch marks, faint but visible, suggesting someone had tested them. She pressed play again. Daniel's voice grew softer. "I can hear someone outside," he whispered. "Footsteps." Slow ones. They know I'm awake. There was a pause, long enough to make everyone in the room hold their breath. Faintly, through the recording, came the sound of a floorboard creaking. Then another. The noise wasn't loud, but it was clear enough to raise the hair on the back of Detective Bennett's neck. Daniel continued, his words barely above a murmur. He said he had locked the door, that he didn't think they could get in without making noise. He said the recorder was his only protection now. If anything happened, he wanted the truth to survive him. I don't think this is about money, Daniel said. It's about a mistake that never stayed buried. The recording ended there, cutting off abruptly. The total length was just over 7 minutes. Silence filled the apartment once more. Detective Bennett stood still, staring at the recorder in her hand. She had no doubt now that Daniel Harper had known his killer. More than that, he had expected his death. The recorder wasn't an accident or a coincidence. It was a message, meant to be found. She turned to one of the officers and asked if there were any signs of forced entry. The answer was no. The door had been locked from the inside. The windows were intact. There was no immediate explanation for how someone could have entered or left. That detail troubled her deeply. As crime scene technicians arrived, Bennett noticed something else. Daniel's phone was missing. His wallet was still on the table, untouched, but his phone was nowhere to be found. Whoever had been there had taken only one thing, and it was something that could contain information. As the body was carefully removed, Detective Bennett made a silent promise to the man she had never met. She would listen to everything he had left behind. She would follow every lead. The final recording was not just a clue. It was a doorway into a story someone had tried very hard to erase. And somewhere beyond that doorway was a truth worth killing for. To understand why Daniel Harper ended up dead on his apartment floor, investigators had to understand who he was long before that final recording. Daniel was not reckless by nature. He was careful, patient, and known for checking facts twice before publishing anything. He did not chase fame or headlines. He chased answers, the kind that made people uncomfortable. Daniel grew up in a quiet town where nothing much happened, and maybe that was where his curiosity came from. He studied journalism believing that truth mattered, even when it was ignored. After college, he worked briefly for a local newspaper, but he left when editors refused to publish a story he spent months researching. They told him it was too sensitive and could cause problems. Daniel took that as a sign. From that point on, he worked alone. As a freelance journalist, Daniel focused on cases that were already considered finished. Cold cases, closed investigations, and official stories that did not quite add up. He believed the most dangerous lies were the ones everyone agreed to stop questioning. Over the years, he built a small but loyal audience online. People trusted him because he showed his work. He posted documents, interviews, and timelines. He let readers decide for themselves. 3 months before his death, Daniel started working on a case that would consume him. It was a hit-and-run incident from 6 years earlier. A 16-year-old girl named Emily Carter was struck by a car while crossing the road late at night. She died before the ambulance arrived. The driver never stopped. The case was closed within weeks due to lack of evidence. No suspect. No arrest. Just another tragedy added to a long list. At first, Daniel had no reason to question it. He only noticed the case because it appeared in a list of unsolved local deaths. But as he read the police summary, small details stood out. Witness statements were vague. Security camera footage from nearby stores was listed as unavailable. The time of death was estimated, not confirmed. Too many blanks for a case that closed so quickly. Daniel requested the full case file through public records. What he received was thin. Pages were missing. Names were blacked out. The report felt rushed, like someone wanted it finished as fast as possible. Daniel wrote in his notebook that night, circling one sentence over and over. Closed due to insufficient evidence. He had seen that phrase before. Too often. He began digging. Daniel tracked down Emily's mother first. The woman had moved to a smaller town since her daughter's death. She was hesitant to talk at first, but when Daniel explained that he believed the case deserved another look, she broke down. She told him the police stopped calling after the first month. No updates. No follow-ups. Just silence. She also told him something that never made it into the report. Emily had called her that night, just minutes before the accident. She sounded scared. She said a car had been following her for 2 blocks. When her mother asked for details, the call cut off. The police dismissed it as stress or imagination. Daniel did not. He interviewed former witnesses listed in the file. One shop owner claimed his security camera was working that night, despite the report saying otherwise. Another witness said they were never contacted again after giving a statement. Slowly, a pattern formed. Information existed, but it had been ignored or erased. Daniel became obsessed. Friends noticed changes. He stopped responding to messages quickly. When he did reply, his texts were short and distracted. He canceled plans, saying he had deadlines. He started carrying a small recorder everywhere, even when meeting people he trusted. When asked why, he joked that memory was unreliable. But his eyes told a different story. 2 weeks before his death, Daniel posted a vague update online. It read, "Some accidents aren't accidents. Some mistakes are protected." It got little attention, but those who knew him felt uneasy. Behind the scenes, Daniel was hitting walls. Every time he followed a lead, it circled back to the same name. A police officer who had signed off on the final report. The same officer who approved the closure of the case. The same officer who overruled a request to reopen the investigation years later. Daniel wrote the name dozens of times in his notes. He tried to contact the officer directly. Emails went unanswered. Calls were never returned. Then something changed. Daniel noticed a car parked across from his apartment one evening. The engine was off, but the lights were on. He watched from his window for nearly an hour. The car did not move. When he stepped outside, it drove away slowly. The next night, it was there again. Daniel told a close colleague about it. He laughed it off at first, but then admitted he was scared. He said he felt watched. Not followed loudly, but carefully, as if someone did not want to be seen. He also mentioned that some of his digital files were gone. Notes he remembered saving were missing. His laptop showed no sign of being hacked, but folders had disappeared. Someone knew what to delete. Daniel began backing everything up. He printed documents and hid copies in different places. He started recording his thoughts at night, speaking quietly into his recorder, explaining what he had found and what he feared. He believed that if anything happened to him, someone needed to know where to look. One night, just days before his death, Daniel realized how deep the truth went. He obtained a traffic camera log that was never attached to Emily Carter's case. The log showed a vehicle passing through an intersection minutes after the reported time of the accident. The license plate was partially visible. When Daniel enhanced the image, the car matched one registered to a family member of the officer he had been investigating. Daniel did not sleep that night. He knew what this meant. This was no longer about a mistake. It was about a cover-up. A powerful one. If he published this information without solid proof, it could disappear like everything else. If he went to the wrong people, he could put himself in danger. Daniel faced a choice he had never faced before. Walk away and stay alive, or keep going and risk everything. He chose the truth. On the night of his death, Daniel stayed in his apartment. He canceled plans and ignored calls. He checked the locks twice. He closed the curtains and turned on every light. He placed the recorder on his desk and made sure it worked. He believed someone might come. He believed the truth had finally made him visible. Daniel Harper was not digging for attention. He was digging because no one else would. He believed that if he stopped, Emily Carter would stay just a name in a forgotten file. And if the cost of exposing the truth was his own life, he was willing to pay it. What he did not know was that the truth was already on its way to him. And it was not coming alone. When detectives first listened to Daniel Harper's final recording, they believed they had already heard the most important part. His fee. His warning. His belief that someone was coming for him. But as the investigation moved forward, they realized the true heart of the case was hidden deeper in the audio, buried beneath breathing, silence, and sounds so faint they were almost missed. The recorder was sent to the forensic audio lab 2 days after Daniel's death. Detective Laura Bennett wanted every second analyzed. Not just the words, but the spaces between them. She believed killers often left traces behind without meaning to. Sometimes those traces spoke louder than confessions. The technician assigned to the case was Mark Ellis, a quiet man known for his patience. He listened to the recording dozens of times using different filters and sound levels. At first, it sounded exactly as the detectives remembered. Daniel's voice. The pauses. The fade. But when Mark slowed the audio and removed background noise, something changed. There was another presence in the room. It was subtle at first. A soft sound beneath Daniel's voice, like fabric moving slowly. Then a low breath that did not match Daniel's breathing pattern. Daniel breathed fast and shallow. This breath was slow and steady. Mark stopped the recording and leaned back in his chair. He listened again, this time focusing only on the background. The sound appeared again, right after Daniel whispered that he could hear someone outside. The noise did not come from the hallway. It came from inside the apartment. Someone had already been there. Detective Bennett was called in immediately. She stood behind Mark as he replayed the enhanced audio. The room felt heavy as the seconds passed. Daniel stopped speaking on the tape. Silence filled the recording, but it was not empty silence. It was the kind filled with tension, like the moment before a storm breaks. Then a second voice spoke. Daniel, the voice said calmly, almost gently, you should have let this go. Detective Bennett felt her stomach tighten. The voice was clear, confident, not raised, not angry. It sounded like someone who believed they were in control. Daniel's response came quickly, his fear no longer hidden. He said the name of the police officer he had been investigating. Hearing it spoken aloud changed everything. Until that moment, the case was built on suspicion. Now it had direction. The conversation that followed was short but devastating. The officer did not confess. He did not admit to murder or even to being responsible for Emily Carter's death. Instead, he spoke in careful half-phrases. He talked about how things had gone wrong. How one mistake turned into many. How protecting one person led to protecting a lie. Daniel challenged him. His voice shook, but he did not back down. He accused the officer of destroying evidence, of silencing witnesses, of choosing family over justice. The officer did not deny it. He only said that some truths ruined more lives than they saved. What chilled investigators most was the tone. There was no panic in the officer's voice. No fear of being recorded. It was as if he believed this conversation would never be heard. Then, suddenly, the recording ended. No struggle. No shouting. Just a soft click as the device was turned off. This raised new questions. If the officer had turned off the recorder, why hadn't he destroyed it? Why leave behind the one piece of evidence that could ruin him? The answer was not simple. As the investigation expanded, detectives returned to Daniel's apartment. They searched again, this time with the knowledge that the killer had been inside while Daniel recorded. They examined the floor, the walls, the furniture. Nothing appeared disturbed. No signs of a fight. No broken objects. It suggested Daniel had not resisted, or that he never had the chance. The medical examiner's report offered another clue. Daniel did not die from a gunshot or stabbing. He suffered a blunt force injury to the head, delivered quickly and with precision. One strike. Enough to kill. It pointed to someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Someone trained. When news of the recording reached the department, tension spread fast. A police officer was now the main suspect in a murder investigation. Internal affairs stepped in, and the department went quiet. Officers avoided talking openly. Doors closed. Calls were taken behind sealed offices. The suspect officer was placed on administrative leave. When questioned, he denied everything. He claimed he had not seen Daniel in years. He said the voice on the recording could be anyone. Technology could fake anything now, he argued. But his hand shook as he spoke. Just slightly. Forensic voice analysts compared the recording to past interviews and radio communications involving the officer. The match was strong. Nearly perfect. Experts testified that the odds of it being someone else were extremely low. Still, the officer held firm. What troubled Detective Bennett most was the timing. According to the recording, the officer was already inside the apartment when Daniel believed someone was outside. That meant Daniel had been wrong about where the danger was coming from. Or worse, that someone else had been there too. The idea unsettled everyone working the case. Security footage from the building was reviewed again. The cameras were old, and several angles were blocked. But one clip showed something interesting. At 11:31 p.m., a man matching the officer's build entered the building. He did not use the front door. He entered through the side entrance, a door known to stick and often left unlocked. At 12:09 a.m., that same man exited. Daniel was estimated to have died around midnight. But that was not the only movement recorded. At 12:14 a.m., another figure left the building. Smaller, wearing a hood. Their face was hidden. They walked quickly and disappeared down the street. The recording did not capture this second person's voice. At least, not clearly. But the presence of that second figure changed the entire story. It meant the officer may not have acted alone. Detective Bennett returned to the audio once more, this time listening for anything that could point to another person. Near the end of the tape, just before the device was turned off, there was a faint sound. A shift. A whisper of movement. It could have been nothing. Or it could have been someone standing just out of reach of a microphone. The case now felt bigger than a single crime. Daniel Harper had not just uncovered a hidden accident. He had stepped into a web of loyalty, fear, and silence that had grown for years. The voice in the background was proof that power had been used to protect a lie. And if more than one person was involved, the truth was even darker than anyone imagined. For Detective Bennett, one thing was clear. Daniel did not die because he recorded his fear. He died because someone heard it. The release of Daniel Harper's final recording sent shockwaves through the city. What had begun as a quiet murder investigation was now impossible to contain. A journalist was dead, and his own voice had pointed directly at a police officer. Within days, the department was under pressure from every direction. Media vans parked outside headquarters. Reporters demanded answers. Social media filled with clips of Daniel's words, replayed again and again, each time sounding more haunting than before. Internal affairs took control of the investigation immediately. The officer named in the recording was suspended from duty, his badge and service weapon taken without ceremony. For years, he had been respected within the department. He had trained younger officers, spoken at community events, and built a reputation as someone who followed rules. Now his name was being spoken in whispers, followed by disbelief and anger. Detective Laura Bennett was assigned to work alongside internal affairs, not because she trusted them, but because she knew the case better than anyone. She carried Daniel's recorder with her like a responsibility she could not set down. Every decision felt heavier now. This was no longer just about solving a murder. It was about exposing a system that may have helped hide the truth for years. The first step was reopening the hit-and-run case of Emily Carter. Boxes of old evidence were pulled from storage. Dust-covered folders were laid out on long tables. As Bennett and her team reviewed them, the flaws became impossible to ignore. Witness statements that ended abruptly. Evidence logs with missing entries. Times that did not match. It was as if someone had carefully removed only the pieces that mattered most. The officer's name appeared everywhere. His signature was on the final report, approving the case closure. He had also been the supervisor on duty the night Emily died. That detail alone raised questions. Why was a senior officer personally involved in such a minor case? When questioned again, the officer maintained his innocence. He said he followed procedure. He said the case had no leads. He said Daniel Harper was a troubled man who became obsessed with conspiracies. He repeated these claims calmly, almost rehearsed. But his eyes told a different story. They darted to the recorder whenever it was mentioned. Then came the search warrant. Investigators searched the officer's home late one afternoon, careful to document every step. The house was clean and orderly, just like the man himself. Family photos lined the walls. Awards sat on shelves. Nothing looked out of place. Until they reached the garage. Behind a stack of old boxes labeled with holiday decorations, they found a sealed plastic container. Inside were documents wrapped in a faded towel. As Bennett pulled them out, her hands began to shake. These were original reports from the Emily Carter case. Reports that were never logged into evidence. Security camera stills that had been marked unusable. A handwritten note explaining a partial license plate number. All of it had been hidden. The most damning piece was a traffic camera image. It showed a dark-colored sedan passing through an intersection minutes after the estimated time of Emily's death. The image was grainy, but clear enough to read most of the plate. When investigators ran it through the system, the car came back registered to the officer's son. The room went silent. The officer's son had been 19 at the time of the accident. He had no criminal record. He had been driving home from a party that night. According to phone records, his phone went dark just before the time of the hit and run. It was turned back on hours later. When confronted with this evidence, the officer finally broke. He did not cry. He did not shout. He simply closed his eyes and admitted that his son had been driving that night. He said it was an accident. He said his son panicked and fled. He claimed he only meant to buy time, to protect his child from a mistake that would destroy his future. One lie became another. He admitted to altering reports, to discouraging witnesses, to ensuring the case closed quietly. But he denied killing Daniel Harper. He claimed he went to Daniel's apartment only to talk, to scare him into dropping the story. He said Daniel was alive when he left. That statement created a new problem. The medical examiner confirmed Daniel had died shortly after midnight. The officer's phone records placed him leaving the apartment building at 12:09 a.m. That left a gap. 9 minutes unaccounted for. Then there was the recorder. Forensic analysis confirmed the device had been turned off after Daniel suffered the fatal blow. That meant someone stayed behind. Someone who wanted silence. Security footage showing the second hooded figure was no longer a background detail. It was a missing piece. Investigators began looking at everyone connected to the officer. Friends, colleagues, family, anyone who might help protect the secret. One name kept surfacing quietly, never spoken out loud at first. The officer's wife. She had always stayed out of the public eye. No interviews. No statements. She attended every hearing but sat silently, hands folded in her lap. When investigators finally questioned her, she appeared calm, almost too calm. She said she knew nothing about Emily Carter. She said she had never met Daniel Harper. But phone records told another story. On the night of Daniel's murder, her phone pinged a cell tower near his apartment. When asked about it, she claimed she had gone for a late drive to clear her head. She could not explain why she turned her phone off for nearly an hour afterward. As pressure mounted, cracks began to form. Neighbors reported seeing a woman matching her description in the area that night. A shop owner remembered a hooded figure walking quickly past his store just after midnight. No face. No clear image. Just the shape of someone in a hurry. Detective Bennett returned to the audio once more. She listened not as an investigator, but as a human being. She listened for fear, for truth, for regret. Near the very end, after the silence everyone thought was empty, she heard it. A faint sound. A breath. Not Daniel's. Not the officer's. Another presence. The case now stood on the edge of something larger than anyone expected. It was no longer about a single corrupt decision. It was about how far people would go to protect the lie they built their lives around. A father protecting a son. A wife protecting a family. A system protecting itself. Daniel Harper had reopened more than a case. He had reopened a wound the city had tried to forget. And as the truth pushed its way into the light, it became clear that the final chapter of this story had not yet been written. By the time the case reached its final stage, the city felt different. Trust had been shaken, and every update from the courthouse was followed closely by people who had never cared about police reports before. Daniel Harper's name became a symbol, not just of a murdered journalist, but of a truth that refused to stay buried. Yet even with arrests made and evidence uncovered, one question still haunted everyone involved. Who delivered the final blow? The trial of the former police officer began under intense scrutiny. Cameras lined the courthouse steps. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy with expectation and fear. The prosecution laid out a powerful case of corruption, cover-ups, and abuse of authority. They showed how the hit-and-run case had been manipulated, how evidence had been hidden, and how Daniel Harper's investigation threatened to expose it all. The officer's defense focused on one point. He admitted to protecting his son. He admitted to lying. But he denied murder. His lawyers argued that there was no direct proof he killed Daniel. No weapon. No fingerprints. No eyewitness. For a moment, it seemed possible that Daniel's killer might never be fully identified. Then the final analysis of the recorder changed everything. Weeks before the trial concluded, Detective Laura Bennett received a call from the forensic audio lab. Mark Ellis sounded different this time. Excited. Nervous. He said they had found something new. Something that had been overlooked because no one believed it could matter. Bennett arrived at the lab that night. Mark replayed the last seconds of the recording. The part everyone assumed was silence. This time, the audio was slowed and enhanced beyond anything used before. The sound was barely there, like a shadow of a sound. A voice. Not the officer's. Not Daniel's. It was a woman's voice. The words were quiet, almost a whisper, but unmistakable. It's done. The room went still. Those two words shifted the entire case. They explained the second figure on the security footage. They explained the missing minutes. They explained why the recorder was turned off but not destroyed. The prosecution moved quickly. They requested the court's permission to bring new charges. The officer's wife was arrested and brought in for questioning. At first, she denied everything. She claimed the audio was manipulated. She said she loved her husband and would never hurt anyone. But when confronted with the enhanced recording, something inside her broke. She confessed. She admitted that she had followed her husband to Daniel's apartment that night. She said she was afraid he would fail, afraid Daniel would release the story before they could stop it. She claimed she never intended to kill anyone. She only wanted to make sure Daniel stayed silent. According to her statement, she waited outside while her husband confronted Daniel. When she heard voices stop, she panicked. She went inside and found Daniel lying on the floor, barely alive. He looked at her, she said. His eyes were open. He knew what was happening. In that moment, she made a choice. She picked up a heavy object from the desk and struck him once. She said she believed he was already dying. She said she thought it would end his suffering. But the truth was simpler and darker. She wanted the story to end. Afterward, she noticed the recorder still running. She whispered those final words and turned it off. She left the apartment moments after her husband, pulling her hood up as she walked into the night. The courtroom fell silent as her confession was read aloud. The officer listened without looking at her. His face was pale, his hands clenched. In trying to protect his family, he had destroyed it completely. His son, once shielded, now faced charges related to the hit-and-run. The lies had finally collapsed. The jury returned its verdict after 3 days of deliberation. The officer was found guilty of conspiracy, evidence tampering, and obstruction of justice. His wife was found guilty of second-degree murder. Both were sentenced to long prison terms. Daniel Harper never lived to see justice served. But his voice did. In the months that followed, the police department underwent major changes. Policies were reviewed. Old cases were reopened. Officers involved in covering up evidence were disciplined or removed. The city could no longer pretend nothing was wrong. Emily Carter's case was officially reopened and closed again, this time with the truth acknowledged. Her family received answers they had waited years for, though no answer could ever replace what they lost. Daniel's apartment remained empty. His belongings were returned to his family, including the recorder. His parents chose to donate it to a journalism museum, where it now sits behind glass. Visitors can listen to parts of the recording. They can hear a man facing fear with honesty, choosing to speak even when silence would have kept him safe. Detective Bennett visited the exhibit once, standing quietly as the audio played. She thought about how close the truth had come to being lost forever, how easily the recorder could have been destroyed, how fragile justice truly was. The final recording was never meant to be a goodbye. It was meant to be a warning. Daniel Harper believed that truth had power, even in its weakest form. A shaky voice. A few honest words. A recording left behind. In the end, that belief proved him right. Because no matter how carefully lies are protected, the truth only needs one voice to survive.